Well, joining us with more on elections that are expected to be pivotal in determining Israel's foreign policy is Gil Tamary, the Washington bureau chief for Channel 10 Israel. Gil, many thanks for joining us. A day out from the election, three main candidates. We've just reported that Benjamin Netanyahu is the favourite. What do you say?
You know, and until a week ago, this election looks like the most boring ever elections in Israel politics. But this week, it seems to be that the gap is narrowing in. And right now, we are in a dead heat between Benjamin Netanyahu and Tzipi Livni. Everything can happen on tomorrow's election in Israel. The latest polls are suggesting that the gap between the two of them is narrowing down to 2 seats in the parliament. So that means that all the options are on the table, and it seems to be that it's going to be a very fascinating election after all.
Gil, how do their policies differ, particularly on Gaza?
It seems to be that immediately after the war in Gaza, Netanyahu and the Likud party had some leverage because they claimed that Israel didn't finish the job, that it was one-time opportunity to try and maybe to topple the Hamas leadership in Gaza, and Israel didn't take the political right decisions. But as we saw that the number of the undecided voters becoming smaller and smaller, it seems to be that these margins that the Likud party used to have basically diminished, and the fact that everyone thought that Netanyahu is already measuring the drapes at the Prime Minister office became to the notion that everything is still open. But we must mention that at the end of the day, with the blocks of parties, it seems to be that for Netanyahu, even if he has only a small margin, after all, it will be much easier to form the next Israeli government.
Now, Ehud Barak and Benjamin Netanyahu have both held the office of Prime Minister before. What are voters saying? Because I'm reading some reports that they're not overly impressed with their options.
Both of them were not so successful as prime ministers. But for Netanyahu's sake, the Israeli public generally feel, according to the polls, that he has matured, and right now, 10 years later, is much more ready to carry the office of Prime Minister. As for Barak, the Israeli public in general doesn't want him to be Israel's next Prime Minister, but they want him to be maybe Israel's next Defense Minister. And in each and every polls in Israel, they are suggesting that he is the best candidate for the office of being or continuing being Israel's Defense Minister. And therefore, it's a possibility, a very reasonable one, that Netanyahu will form a coalition together with the Labour Party and continue with Barak as his defense minister.
And Gil, what about the United States? I mean, is there one candidate in particular that the Obama administration would prefer to work with?
The United States in general never interfere with Israel's internal politics, and they will work eventually with whomever the Prime Minister will be. And the big question is what kind of coalition each of the candidates will build. If it will be something of more a national unity government, it will be much easier to the US administration to deal with. If it will be a right-wing coalition, it will be much more difficult to both sides to cooperate in coexistence.
Well, not long now. So Gil Tamary, Washington bureau chief for Channel 10 Israel, many thanks for the update.
Thank you, Anna.